Good morning, everyone. People are filing in. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the Goodman Speakers webinar with Phil Hansen, Embrace the Shake. This is probably a webinar that has been overdue for us. We could have done this every single month over the last year, but I'm thrilled that we're doing it today because I think it's extremely important for all of us. And I'm really thrilled because I've worked a ton with Phil. He's one of my favorites. And I am excited that I get to be an attendee today and I get to take part in the engaging and interactive piece that Phil is going to bring to everybody. Hi, Phil.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Yes.
So you guys know me. I'm not going to do like a formal introduction or bio. Phil's going to get right into it, and you're going to know and love him immediately. But we're going to do some Q&A at the end. If you guys want to throw Q&A into the chat, I'll kind of monitor that, and then we'll do it at the end as well. You guys can throw some questions into the chat at the end, but we'll monitor the whole time. Phil's going to keep you busy, both watching this mind-blowing stuff that he does, and then also you're actually going to be, doing some interactive stuff too. So thanks for joining us today, Phil. I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you to everyone who's decided to choose us to spend this hour with. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Phil.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, and I do want to put a couple little elements at the beginning for me as well, is that I do want you to have a pencil and paper or pen and paper at the ready. So maybe in about 10-15 minutes. So if you need to grab that at some point, please do. And then the other thing I want you to have in your phone, the other thing I want you to have in your hands is the thing we're never supposed to have, which is your phone. So if you would, I do want you to grab your phone, go ahead and open it up. So put in your passcode. And then when you open it up, I want you to find your browser and open up your browser. And I'll explain all of this as we go along. And then I want you to pull up this website. So that is Phil, P-H-I-L, Phil in the circle. And now you can see it a little better, philinthecircle.com/Jenna. And what you will see when you get there, and you can see on the screen there, is this little drawing program. And what we are going to be doing is I'm going to be leading you through some different writing prompts, drawing exercises. And the whole goal is that as an artist, one of the things that I've always kind of struggled with this digital divide between us is the fact that we're not in the shared space anymore. And so I was trying to find a way that we can kind of make that space a little bit smaller. And what we're going to do is, as you're doing all these drawings, at the end of today, I'm going to actually take all these drawings and I'm going to make a huge mosaic artwork with your drawings. And this is all going to be real time. So, okay. And hopefully everybody now is over at the site. You're seeing this on your screen. And now let me walk you through this little drawing page here for a moment. So you might notice very quickly that this part is the drawing part. This is where you can do the drawings. And because it loads differently on everybody's phone, if you need to move this up, you need to actually put your finger on the spiral to move it around. So you can move it around, but make sure your finger is essentially outside of that drawing area. And then if at any point you want to refresh your whole screen, kind of wipe the drawing clean, you can do that just by hitting refresh on the page. Cool, okay. And so now what I want you to do, and we're gonna kind of start with an easy prompt because I think it's a nice way to get us all into the space here, is I just want you to write your name. That's it. Seriously, just write your name, super simple. You can do your full name, partial name, maybe a nickname you had growing up. Those are always my favorite, the entertaining things that we were called when we were younger. And then once you're done writing your name, if you would, fill in this empty white space that's around your name with just some little drawings. Put something in there, some little wingdings, whatever you want to put in there. Put some extra stuff in there. And then when you are done, go ahead and hit submit. And you can take a couple extra minutes with this if you want. Feel free to spend a little extra time with any of the drawings that we're going to be doing because, well, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. And that'll be nice too, because in this big mosaic that I'm going to make at the end of everything, and you'll get an update in a week or 2 weeks on this, is then you, of course, get to zoom in and you get to hunt for your name and your pieces. All right, so let me give you a quick little tour around the studio, kind of show you, I guess, nothing that I'm actually working on right now because everything is in progress, which is kind of a bummer, but also kind of cool. But that's how it is sometimes in a studio, especially these days for me. Okay, so this doesn't look like much, and it's actually just a bag of sawdust that was sent to me from what's called the Girls Garage, a nonprofit in San Francisco where they teach girls how to use woodworking equipment. And what I'm gonna do, and it took me a little while to figure out what to do with it, but I actually mixed it with Elmer's glue, and then I make a paste. I'm able to actually smear it on the paper and actually paint with sawdust, which is something I never imagined doing, but is really kind of entertaining. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then this is something that I've struggled with for a long time, and I think I'm on the edge of figuring it out. But I bought all these little tiny people. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out how I was going to use them until just recently. I figured if I take some double-sided tape, the little people will actually stand up until they fall over. But that's a kind of nice way to then utilize these little pieces as essentially pixels in a picture. So that's what I'm going to be working towards on that. So as I said, nothing in progress at the moment, everything on the edge of starting. And I use lots of weird materials. I do some traditional stuff, of course, but another strange one is one time I realized I could take layers of cardboard and assemble them to make a gigantic cardboard beard, which is fun. I love the mustache. And the reason that I wanted to kind of give you a quick little tour, obviously very quick, share some things with you is because, to show you that I am an artist and to share this space with you, because this is a space that means a lot to me. And this is a space that almost didn't happen because a number of years ago, as I was getting into art, this was back in middle school when I was first getting introduced to art, and then high school, that's when I was able to take my first art class. And in art class, of course, you're introduced to all different styles of art. But the style that I absolutely fell in love with, many of you are gonna know, is Pointillism. And Pointillism is using dots, lots and lots of little dots to make a picture. Many of us know that famous picture, and there you can see the little dots. It's pretty intense. You can only imagine. Oh, and this thing is like 12 feet wide, the original. It's absolutely massive. And what I loved about it was the almost obsessive qualities of spending that much time creating something. That is what I loved as a kid. I loved to just kind of hone in and just kind of immerse myself in a project. And so when I started doing Pointillism, I started with a Sharpie. It's a nice big pen, it's around, it's common, easy to grab. But then bit by bit, I found my way working with a smaller and smaller pen. And that is a 0.005 millimeter. And that is absolutely minuscule. And you can imagine working with a dot that small, your hand has to be really steady. But for me, occasionally didn't have a steady hand. Well, why would that be, right? Well, occasionally, maybe we don't sleep very well. So lack of sleep or caffeine, and Mountain Dew is my favorite drink. So sometimes, I'd be sitting there in my 7:30 a.m. art class, a little bit of a tremor in my hand, trying to do all my dots and get them just perfectly placed. And when my hand would shake, I couldn't get them where I wanted them. So I just hold really tight. And then that would actually cause fatigue in my arm, which would cause my hand to shake more. So I'd hold even tighter, and then more fatigue, more shake. And that was just this cycle that progressed until my hand shook constantly. And what had once started out as kind of these beautiful, perfect little dots ended up looking more like tadpoles because of the shake. And eventually it degraded to the point where I had trouble holding anything. And this was the straightest line I could draw. And after spending at that point what was really all of my artistic life perfecting dots, just being so focused on this one style of art, ultimately, I ended up dropping out of art school. And then a short time later, I just quit doing art completely. And art, this dream, this passion of my life was just gone. And I felt kind of lost. I really wasn't sure where to go, what to do, but you just kind of keep carrying on when that happens. And so I did, and a few years went by. And after those few years, I was starting to get curious again, about making art and finding a creative outlet in my life. And as I was thinking about that, a friend of mine was like, well, have you ever gotten the shake checked out? Go to a neurologist. And that seemed very obvious in hindsight, but I never had gone to the doctor. And so I went in, and the doctor ran me through some different tests and sat me down and gave me the very simple yet hard diagnosis of permanent nerve damage. And I don't know if you've ever received bad news in the doctor's office before. There's no two ways to put it. It sucks. It's a crummy moment. You just have to kind of sit there, think about it, and figure out, what your future is going to look like. And so there I am, and the doctor's probably about this far away from me, and the doctor's looking at me as I'm quietly thinking. And he's like, "Well, if your hand shakes, why don't you just embrace the shake?" And I was just kind of stunned, kind of silent, and I was like, "Because I don't want to embrace the shake," because I went to the doctor for advice. Or I didn't go for, I went for medication, I went for a solution, Yet all I was gonna get was advice. And that was not it's not the aim, that's not what you hope for. But there I was. I'm like, okay, so let me think about that. And I left. And it was a few weeks later, I was heading home from college on the bus to my apartment. And I was thinking about the doctor's words, embrace the shake. I was like, well, what would it look like if I actually embraced the shake? So that day when I got home, I put a piece of paper on the wall, I grabbed a pencil, and I just started letting my hand shake, and I started making a bunch of scribble pictures. And even though this wasn't the kind of art that I was, ultimately passionate about, it really felt nice to be creative again. And so I began looking for other ways that I could take an image and essentially break it apart into little pieces, because that's what I found I just love so much about pointillism, was the small pieces making something bigger. I was like, I love that. So how can I look for that? So the first idea I had was actually just to get away from my hands completely, because I didn't want to deal with my hands. And so I proceeded to dip my feet in paint. I walked on a canvas and made a picture of a homeless man named Paul, who used to live down the street from me many years ago when I lived in Seattle. Or in a 3D structure consisting of 2x4s, I created a 2D image by burning it with a blowtorch. And I discovered that if I worked in a larger scale and with bigger materials, my hand wouldn't really hurt. And I went from having a single approach to art and pointillism to this approach to creativity that just completely changed my artistic horizons. And that was really the first time in my life that I ever ran into this idea that a limitation can drive creativity. And, looking back, I'm really glad I did, because we've had a lot of limitations these days. But, in that moment, there I was, I took the doctor's advice and I embraced the shake. And here I was finding this bonus part was not just embracing the shake, but it actually caused more creative ideas. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And that seems wrong. It seems backwards, right? We're often taught that to be more creative, we need more tools, more money, we need help, we need more, not less. And so I was like, well, if less causes creativity, could I create limitations? Could I intentionally make a constraint in my life, and what could come of that? And so I set myself on a number of different tasks to try to create projects through limitations. And one of the ideas I came up with was to actually just replace the paintbrush, just find a different way to put the paint on the canvas. That was a very small limitation, but also, it kind of seemed like it could cross over into very meaningful. Like if I could rethink a pen, that's kind of a big deal. I use a pen a lot. So if I could rethink a brush, what's going to happen from that? And I ended up coming up with a bunch of different ideas, but then one evening I was inspired by a movie that I was watching. And so if you would maybe toss a couple guesses of what movie it was, and here's the project.
'Cause I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers up on the right side. The record keeps spinning off the track, but the same song keeps playing back. She lights a black to smoke in the bath.
So that is, of course, Bruce Lee in the movie that I was watching was Enter the Dragon. And that was one of those weird ideas that you have in the middle of the night that was just, it was super cool to have the idea come to life. And it was one of those things that you think about in the middle of the night, but you don't think is going to come true. And then when it does, you're just like, holy moly, there it is. But then it was this confirmation, right? Here was a limitation I set for myself. And I came up with an idea that I really couldn't have imagined, honestly, before. So it's like, okay, well, what's the next step? What would be the ultimate limitation? That was kind of where I set my sights. So it's like, let me think about, the biggest constraint I could imagine, which for me very quickly turned out to be the idea I had was to destroy all of my art. Because I like to preserve things. I like to keep things very clean and precise. And the idea of not having my artwork seemed very constraining, because what would I have? How would I show people? All that kind of stuff. And how would it affect my art, my creation experience? And it took me a little while to figure out what to do with that idea, but eventually it turned into a year-long project that I called Goodbye Art, where the idea was that each and every piece of art had to be destroyed after its creation. In the beginning of Goodbye Art, I focused on forced destruction, like this image of Jimi Hendrix coming together. This is made with over 7,000 matches, and this is the real sound of this thing burning. So of course, that is forced destruction. Then I opened it up to creating art that was destroyed naturally. And if you're squeamish, please look away because I went for chewing up and spitting out food. And I made a chewed up and spit out Britney Spears because society has put her through a lot. Or just using sidewalk chalk and drawing stick figures, tens of thousands of stick figures. This whole picture is like 60 feet wide. It's absolutely massive. Or on a very, very cold Minnesota winter night, I took wine outside to freeze, and then I brought the wine back inside and I let it thaw. And that is just red and white wine. So the last iteration of destruction was to try to produce something that didn't actually exist in the first place. So what I did is I organized a bunch of candles on a table, I lit them, and then I blew them out. Then I just repeated that process, over and over and over with that same set of candles. And then I assembled all those little bits of video into this larger image. So, this end image was never visible as a physical whole. It was actually destroyed before it ever existed. And as I was in that process, making an artwork and destroying it initially, I thought I was going to be emotionally destroyed by that process, but it actually made me feel more free and open. And I ended up coming up with more ideas than ever because, what happens? You make a picture, you have it on the surface in front of you, and you throw it away. And you feel sad for that thing that's gone, you're bummed. But at the same time, here's a blank canvas. I'm free to create again. And so it's kind of this wonderful, interesting place to be. And so this idea that the doctor kind of set into my head, embrace the shake, and then from there, limitations driving creativity, that attitude, that spirit has really been brought forward with me now. And I've done this kind of an experience for myself over and over and over, setting limitations, embracing them, trying to find art, but then doing that in the other aspects of life as well. What sort of a constraint and obstacle am I up against? And what can I do? How can I get creative with it? And so what I want you to think about, and hopefully, of course, as somebody sharing a story, we're always hopeful that, people are thinking about their own lives and kind of applying the idea. And so I wonder right now if there's a challenge or a constraint or a limitation that's at top of mind. And I'm guessing there is, but if not, think about it for a moment because we're going to move into drawing number 2. So again, if you would, grab your phone, open up your phone, and if you would, with this browser page, just keep that open. So we're going to do a couple more drawings. So make sure you're over on this browser page. And we're going to do element number 2, which is actually just going to be another prompt for writing, but a little bit different style. So now you have this limitation, this challenge in your head. And of course, all of our limitations, they're huge. Our constraints are huge. So what I want you to think about is actually boil it down to a single word. So take that massive challenge that you're faced with and bring it all the way down, summarize it in a single word if you can. And then what I want you to do is actually just write the word really small on the page here. So write whatever your constraint is really small. And then once you have that constraint written, go ahead and put a little tiny box around it. And if anybody is joining us late, you just want to grab your phone, open up your browser, and pull open this website. And that will allow you to see what we're doing and join in. And at any time, of course, you can join in. The first thing we did was write our names. So if you want to go back, if you came in a little bit late and you missed the first one, just write your name. So when we're done with this one, you can jump onto that one. Okay, so once you have your challenge, your constraint as a little tiny word with a little tiny box around it, now what I want you to do is actually scribble in the backgrounds with just a handful of scribbles. And occasionally, like that, the little widget, I don't know if you saw that, but the widget moved on me. And that's gonna happen. That little drawing surface can move around. So do some scribbles. And what you're kind of shooting for is kind of a medium dark. So right there, that's kind of what we're shooting for. You could even go a hair lighter than that, but not just a couple scribbles, but not really dark. So that's what you're shooting for. And when you are done with that, go ahead and hit submit. And of course, the submit button will kind of do a little spiraling save for a moment, and then it will send on its way. Perfect, just like that. Okay, and if you're still working on that, feel free. And anytime, of course, any of these drawings, if you need to take a couple extra minutes, feel free. And if you want to go back and pick up that first one, writing your name, feel free to do that as well. All right, so what I want to move on to now is, let me back up. So a number of years ago, I had the opportunity to speak at TED. Of course, we all know TED. And this was back in 2013. It was really TED was really in its prime at that moment. And it was a really amazing opportunity to share my story. And, of course, it means that immediately I was my story was shared with millions of people. and it was kind of overwhelming. But what happened is I really had kind of two groups of people asking me kind of two main questions. And the first question was how to be more creative. And that's a kind of fun one. And that's where we want to have your pencil and paper at the ready. So make sure you have that out. Grab it if you need to. Run over somewhere else in the room. Grab your pen and paper, pencil and paper. And we're going to actually be doing now a drawing on the paper, not drawing on your phone, because this idea of how to be more creative is an interesting one, right? Because it actually can mean different things to different people. For me, how to be more creative means coming up with more ideas. But for someone else, how to be more creative might mean how to better our skills so we can execute our ideas, or how to be motivated so we can actually have an idea that is in our head, but actually bring it to life. But for me, I want to focus on this idea of coming up with more ideas. So what we're going to do is we are going to engage in a process that I call systematic creativity. And our end goal in the next 8 minutes here is everybody's going to draw a cartoon. A cartoon, seriously. Just one cartoon, and don't feel pressure on this drawing. We can do stick figures, it's all good, whatever you want to do, but enjoy the process, because it kind of puts your brain into a weird spot. And so what systematic creativity requires, it requires a goal. So our goal is to make a cartoon, and then it requires you to analyze the past and kind of reprocess information, look at it for something new. And what that means for us right now is we're actually going to look at cartoons that I created in the past, and we're going to process those. We're going to kind of mix ideas and things around and then create something new just from these 6 cartoons that are in front of me. So let me share those cartoons with you here. I love the cow chasing the farmer. Hopefully I'm getting a scoff out of you at this point. Nice. Okay, so those are the 6 cartoons. And then what you do in this process to essentially analyze what we have in front of us, as you can see here, I have a piece of paper that has subject, action, location, and bonus item written on it. And what I did, and I've already started this process, or finished it rather, is I've actually written down everything that we have in front of us. And so what we are going to do, and if you're not full screen, if these are a little hard to read, go ahead and make sure that the video you're watching, the live feed right now, is full screen, so you can see everything there nice and clear. And then what I want you to do is, all we're going to do is each of us is just going to pick 2 words. So you're going to pick 2 words, and let's start with me. I'm going to pick cow and museum, and I'm going to try to come up with a cartoon for cow and museum. You could pick throwing a doggy bag. That sounds strange. Bumper sticker and a candle. And you can already see what we're trying to do here. One, we're trying to reduce the pressures of creativity by making creativity happen very quickly and with odd results in our head. And then also, too, we're trying to create kind of unusual thoughts in our brain. That's one of the major components of being more creative, is we want our brains to kind of fire off and come up with things that are a little strange, because from strange ideas can come really beautiful, interesting, disruptive ideas. And also it just gets you moving. That's a nice thing too. So I'm going to turn on 5 minutes of music. Seriously, 5 minutes of music. Enjoy the tunes and pick 2 words and come up with a cartoon. So here we go. And we have our 2-minute warning. So you have 2 minutes now. If you need to hurry along, you can. But if you want to take your time, feel free.
Say no. Don't say no.
All right, and we have our 1-minute warning, and I know some of you are probably done and enjoying the music, so what I want you to do when you are done is actually text me your drawing. Seriously, grab your phone again, take a picture of your drawing, type in the phone number you see there, and send it to me. And we have an iPad here, and we'll be able to check them out. So send them in real quick. You got just a moment left here.
Keep holding out. You don't let go.
All right, and hopefully you are wrapping up, and as you wrap up, again, grab your phone, take a picture of it, of your cartoon, and send it over to me here, and I am going to get your drawings pulled up. We already have drawings coming in, which is awesome. Let's see what we got here. We have, let's start with a shark and a snowman, and the snowman is at the beach, I'm guessing. It is wintertime. And I like the different expressions because the snowman is clearly very concerned, and the shark, it just looks darn happy to see the snowman, which I like that. I don't know if I ever would have thought about if a snowman would be happy to see a shark or not. And then we have a little bird up in the tree there. Hello, moon. I like that. Just enjoying the nighttime. Let's see. We have a farm at the ocean, which is, that would be beautiful. I bet a cow or any other animal would enjoy that sight. And let me share mine with you here as well. So my cartoon, I was thinking about, I think it was in Chicago, so we're going with the Chicago connection here, is there was a cow, I think it was the farmer that had the cow was O'Leary, and the cow that knocked over the lantern that burned down Chicago, like in the early 1900s. And so here we have a cow museum, and the kid is very excited to see Bessie O'Leary. I called the cow Bessie because, of course, Bessie started the rebellion that took out Chicago. So you can see very quickly here, this is kind of a fun way to get your mind moving. It's a fun way to think about a challenge, to contextualize, any sort of a constraint or obstacle that we're up against. But this isn't just about, yes, being a cartoonist. You can think about the limitation that you just wrote down a couple minutes ago. What's a different way that you could take that limitation and begin to kind of find the categories, find the past, find the present, find the future of it, and try to contextualize different possibilities. And then to start to connect those different possibilities. Because when you do that, you're starting to get your mind to work more freely, more creatively. And when you start to break categories and move things around, really interesting ideas happen. And so, I think that the main takeaway for us here, the three things that we want to be thinking about is that, the main goal is to think differently, to get your mind seeing ideas and possibilities in a little different way than maybe you had before. You want to be generating more ideas. And this isn't about generating great ideas. This is about generating lots of ideas, because that, again, reduces the pressure of creativity. That opens ourselves up to more ideas, which is super important just to keep our brains moving. And then, of course, you may discover a disruptive idea, which is totally cool. And even if it's just a disruptive idea for ourselves, breaking ourselves out of a rut, finding a place where we feel stuck, and then thinking differently about it and getting ourselves there. And something that I like to think about periodically when I run into different quotes from different artists, which of course I do oftentimes, is I like to re-engage with quotes, because sometimes a quote that didn't mean a whole lot to me at one point in my life, all of a sudden can mean a whole lot more. And so the one I want to share with you is actually from Aretha Franklin, which Aretha Franklin might seem a little removed from systematic creativity and cartooning, but she said, sometimes what you're looking for is already there. And I like that. Initially, I think when I ran into this quote, I was kind of like, sometimes what you're looking for is already there. Like, okay. But then as I thought about it more, I was like, wait, that is this process. That is systematic creativity. And the extra little element that she throws in here that I was just overlooking completely is that she's saying what we have in front of us, that is where the answer is. Again, it's not looking outside of ourselves for help. It's not looking for external resources. What we're looking for, it's here in front of us. It is within our own internal resources, our creativity, our adaptability, our resilience, agility. Those are the things that we need to be paying attention to when we're trying to be creative. And again, not looking on the outside for solutions, which I love that idea. It kind of brings everything home a little bit. So again, this process isn't just about coming up with a cartoon idea. This is about getting yourself into a different zone, being able to kind of push yourself and think of things in different ways, which obviously we all have to do a lot these days, kind of nudge ourselves and try to get our juices flowing in a certain sense. Okay, so I want you to, again, pull open your phone. We're gonna move on to drawing number 3, and we are gonna do an actual drawing this time, but with a little extra steps in it. And the first part of it, as you're opening your phone, punching in your code, pulling open the website, as you're doing that, what I want you to think about is something that you can't live without. That's a nice idea, right? That's a nice thing to think about. We talked about limitations a minute ago. So now what I want you to think about is something that you gotta have in your life. And this could be maybe a favorite sport, maybe a hobby. This could be a favorite food, and maybe if there's a food you haven't had in a while. I think with as much quarantining as many of us have been doing, that here's an opportunity to think about something that you've been missing, that you gotta have in your life. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this in kind of a 2-step process. And the first step is I want you to actually click on the button down here that apparently I can't move my mouse in the right way. Well, I'm gonna point at it then. So click on this button down here, which is kind of the big brush. That's what we're gonna be just shooting for. And then after you click on the big brush, just like that, now what we want to do is actually fill in this entire screen completely black. So we're just gonna black out this white screen. So go wild with it here for a moment. Your finger might slip off of the little drawing pad once in a while, and it might move on you, so you have to readjust. But just scribble in completely black. And again, as you're doing this, think about the thing you can't live without, the thing that you gotta have in your life. So scribble, scribble, scribble. It takes a little time. That's actually it's a good sized little drawing screen. So really fill it in and get all the way to the edges, get every little speck. And then what I want you to do is now, if you would look up to the screen for a brief moment, is I want you to press on the eraser icon, which is that one right there. And then probably what I want you to do too is also press on the small brush. So now you have at the bottom of the page here selected, you have the eraser and the small brush. And now what you're gonna do is actually just erase your drawing. So you're gonna make your drawing in this black space, but with the eraser. So you're gonna draw your drawing, but inverted almost. So draw the thing you can't live without. And I'm not gonna wait for this to finish. I'm gonna kind of jump into the next thing. So I wanna talk about the other big question that people ask me after TED. So keep drawing though. Listen as you're drawing, enjoy kind of doodling in a certain sense as you're drawing. And when you are done, hit submit and share it with me. But so the other thing, I mentioned that there were kind of 2 big audiences, right? So I had a lot of people that were more into the art side of things who asked me how to be more creative. And I had a lot of people kind of just thinking about, life and generalities, like how can we overcome limitations? How can we take the challenges in front of us and get creative with it? And that was an interesting one to think about because, I didn't have an answer. I think that was kind of the first thing I realized is I'm like, I don't know what to say because my own transition through embracing the shake had happened very naturally, very slowly. And I didn't know if there were like deliberate steps that people could take to create that change for themselves. But I began to think about it and of course wanted to talk to a lot of people about limitations because I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a small chance I could actually get to an answer. And so I decided I was going to do a huge art project because sometimes I do these big art projects where I will post my phone number online and people will share stories with me. And then I actually handwrite all of those stories to create a huge artwork, literally with their handwritten stories. And you'll see what this looks like in a moment. But within this project, so I was going to post my phone number online. I wanted to talk to people. And I also decided I was going to run a Kickstarter campaign to fund the creation of a short documentary about the piece. And so I launched the Kickstarter campaign. I posted my phone number online. I asked people to call me and share a story with me about a limitation in their life. And I spoke with people from England, France, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Australia, Angola. There were over 30 countries in total in every single state in the United States. And as this project was progressing, at one point, CNN even reached out and asked if I'd write an opinion piece about the experience. But at that point, I had way more questions than I did opinions. But I went for it anyway, because I didn't want to miss the resume building opportunity. And after an entire month of handwriting, I kid you not, a month, I found myself staring at the sea of stories. There's over 1,000 handwritten stories in this piece. And as I went through the motions of wrapping up the Kickstarter campaign, sending out all the rewards and overseeing the creation of a short documentary, I began to call people back, discussing their stories in detail. And slowly I discovered that the key to changing the way we think about a limitation lies in the distinction between what I call a limitation versus a self-limiting belief. And I've begun to take this whole idea really a massive step further. And I believe that basically every single challenge that we are confronted with in life, and we are going to put this up here nice and big. The challenge, this is the word that we use, but it's kind of an umbrella word. Underneath it are a couple things, and you can see real quick and easy what those two things are. That is the limitation and the self-limiting belief. And these two things combined create the challenge. And you can see this play out really easy on a small team, as I'm sure many of you have been on a small team. If you're not in the moment, so you can imagine one in the past. And what happens is we have 4 people here, okay? They are working together and they are heading towards a common goal. So there we go. There's the 4 people, they're on a path. This is normal, right? This happens all the time to us at work. We're set on a task, we head towards the goal with our group of people. And then there's another task and another goal, and you keep going and going and going. But what happens occasionally, and probably a fair amount for most of us recently, is all of a sudden, there's a new challenge imposed on us. And that's what that little blob is. That's the challenge. These people have just run into the challenge on their way to the goal. But what happens here is you might have some people hit the challenge and they just get stuck. They're stuck. They don't know how to get out of it. They just feel confined. They're kind of in a loop. They don't know how to see past this new challenge. But other people, they just jump around. They don't even see the challenge. They're just, well, that's not a big deal. And then other people hit it and they bounce and they bounce and they bounce, and eventually they find their way around. And this place right here, I find really interesting because it's in that place where we have multiple people in the same situation, but they're having a completely different experience. And that different experience, that variation that we see time and time again, when we're working with the people around us and we hit a new challenge, a new obstacle, the reason that there's so much variation all comes back to these self-limiting beliefs. Because, all of us, we have a belief system in our lives that helps us navigate life, helps us understand life, how to move forward, how to make good decisions from bad decisions. But sometimes the belief system, you can think of this also as assumptions, just your perspective. But I feel like beliefs is a powerful word. Our beliefs are powerful. It's hard to shift those big things in life. And what happens is sometimes our beliefs can get in the way. And when they get in the way and they're tied to a constraint, all of a sudden that creates a massive challenge. And I'm going to pull out one example for you from this huge project. I mentioned There was this huge Kickstarter campaign, and I created this short documentary. And there was one person that called in, and her name was Sarah. Actually, there was 1,000 people that called in, but the one I'm going to share with you is her name was Sarah. And Sarah had 3 things that were happening in her life. The first is that she suffered from a disorder called trichotillomania. And that's a disorder that causes people to actually pick out and pull out their hair uncontrollably. So Sarah had big bald patches on her head. But she was also in high school, and she was from a low-income family. And that combination was important because that meant that there were nonprofits that would supply her with wigs because of her disorder. But the nonprofits had a cutoff date of graduating from high school. And this is where things really got sticky for Sarah because she was just a week away from graduating when I first talked to her. So I'm going to play a piece of this short documentary that shares Sarah's story as she kind of moves through this moment in life where all of a sudden she can't wear wigs anymore and she can't afford new ones and she has no idea what the future is going to look like because she has big bald patches on her head. And I think she shares her story in a really beautiful way. So here's Sarah.
I was diagnosed with an impulse control disorder called trichotillomania. I am trying to embrace the limitation by getting rid of my wigs and shaving my head. But that's scary, especially for a girl, where the expectation is that you have hair and that your hair is beautiful and that your hair is thick and luscious and lovely. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've been so tormented by that expectation. If I can learn to forgive myself for something that I can't control, I need to stop hiding. I'm just going to do it then. I'm just going to say, hey, could you shave my head now? Because after graduation, I'm just going to discard of this.
I'm surely gonna glance at the sky and smile.
So, this is it. My state of mind was like realizing for the first time what my reality was. I was pulling off a mask and I wasn't sure if I liked what I saw underneath it because I was wearing the mask for everyone else, but I didn't realize that I had been wearing it myself as well. I just remember feeling so stifled by doors that were closed all around me. I couldn't go to sleepovers and have my hair braided. Didn't let my boyfriend ever touch my hair. No swimming, no roller coasters, not rolling the windows down. Something that I thought was giving me freedom was actually holding me back. And now that I've gotten rid of it, it's like all around me, doors have just flown open. And I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. And it feels so good. It feels so good.
Amazing story, right? I felt so honored to have been able to overlap Sarah at that point in her life and to, see as somebody went through that experience. Because, for me, looking back at my own limitation, I couldn't really remember the steps that I went through. But then with Sarah, it was just so darn clear and so incredible to see her just make that mental shift so quickly and so meaningfully. And especially when she's at the end, kind of looking up off to the side there and imagining the future, which is kind of like, kind of gets you. And, again, talking to Sarah, but then talking with all these other people is a really interesting experience because, for me, it made me think up a lot about what was my limitation. And then once I started to realize that this belief was there, and I started to think about what was that. And my limitation was that my hand shakes, right? Very simple, very straightforward. But my self-limiting belief was that if my hand shakes, I can't make art. And that belief, you can see how that's just going to start to spiral. And I'm just going to feel stuck in this loop that just goes on and on and on. And kind of like with Sarah too, right? Her limitation, trichotillomania, you saw that she was able to transform that. But before she transformed it, what did she do? She put up barrier upon barrier upon barrier, protecting, right, herself within this belief. And you could just see how difficult that was for her to realize afterwards, just kind of like both hope, but then also that sadness of where she had been. But what I think is so interesting and meaningful, and let's do this let's take this metaphor even further. And let's say that we are a raindrop. So there we are. We're the raindrop. We've now fallen through the sky and we've hit this challenge. Whatever this challenge is for you, whatever you're running into. What's interesting, I'm not going to be cavalier with this statement because I don't want to say that we get a choice, but I'm going to come back to it. But I'm going to say that we do get a choice. I will loop back to why I believe that. So when we hit the challenge, we get to almost, again, make this choice of, do we want to come over here and get creative with a limitation? You know, getting creative with a task of, hey, let's generate a cartoon. Maybe you weren't a cartoonist, maybe all these things, these constraints against you, but what'd you do? You jumped in, you drew a cartoon. But then sometimes we find ourselves falling over here. You know, and that's really what Sarah and I did, right? Both of us were just stuck in this place. And the reason that I want to talk about this idea that this is something that we get to choose is because in a certain sense we do. It's really, really hard to make this transition, and that transition is ultimately the secret sauce. And it's a lot of things in our life that kind of push us to this moment of making that decision. Because what happens is every single day we run into this challenge fresh. Every day. You know, even though you had your challenge apply to you once, me, permanent nerve damage, well, every day when I woke up, I had the opportunity to get creative with it. And yet I just kept coming over here. Until that one day, and same thing with Sarah, we both decided, you know what, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say, what can I do with this limitation? And when you start to kind of open yourself up to that, you know, we can think, again, systematic creativity. You can start to make lists. You can start to say, you know, what are the possibilities here? How can I recombine things to get creative with that limitation? You can ask yourself questions. You could ask other people questions. And when you start to do all of that together, what you begin to do is you essentially begin to kind of take a piece out of that belief. You begin to kind of knock back your own self, and you start to open yourself up to the possibilities. And when you do that enough, you literally can get rid of a self-limiting belief. And this is why when we look back at a huge challenge in our life and it doesn't seem as big anymore, have you ever had that happen where you look back and you're like, oh, that huge thing, it's not as big of a deal anymore. And you see this happen with kids, because kids can really get tied up in their beliefs about the way to behave and the way to be in the world. But once you get rid of that belief, and I'm not being cheesy here, but literally the challenge begins to just disappear. And what it is replaced with is openness. And you get to kind of head different directions. And this is where I found myself. So if you recall, my self-limiting belief was that if my hand shakes, I can't do art. But what eventually I did is I found myself over here with a limitation. I said, how can I make art with a shaky hand? And when I did that, again, you start to open up possibilities. But I'm not going to say this part is quick and easy, because what happens? You get cut off, right? An idea doesn't go anywhere. Maybe none of them go anywhere. But then ideas evolve. You try again. And you start to have a little evolution of different ideas. And then some of those get stuck, and you just start to go in all different kinds of directions, looking for possibilities. And eventually, what we all hope for is eventually you find the one possibility where you say, that's it. That's the answer to this whole challenge. And then the beautiful and kind of frustrating part is, again, I said that when you look back, you don't see this stuff anymore. You don't see the effort that you put into it. You just start to see this clean, simple path that got you to where you were. And that's why it's important to keep yourself open to that process of exploring, because the exploration is what gets us to the beautiful end result that we all want, but we need to keep ourselves in that place of continuing to explore. And, you know, that idea of a limitation, you know, being, you know, this place for creativity, it completely changed the course of my life. You know, now when I run into a barrier or I find myself creatively stumped, of course, I still struggle, right? That is the human way. That is not just the artist's way. That is the way we all are. We run into a new massive challenge, it's going to be a pain in the butt. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to get into it. We're going to try to see the possibilities. And that's what I try to do constantly, is just, you know, ask myself, well, what is there? What is a possibility? And it's led to all kinds of unusual art projects. Like one time I put a bunch of worms on a canvas. I let them crawl around, and it took a while, but they eventually made a picture of Edgar Allan Poe. And another time I destroyed an absolutely beautiful Fender Stratocaster Lefty. Then I assembled the bits and pieces to make a picture of Kurt Cobain, and then I smashed that. Oh, I hated seeing that thing go. Such a heart tear in so many different ways. I had so many cameras that literally every camera I have, and every phone that was in the studio that day. And it was a fun project to make, but it's really sad to see it go. But I always have that hope that when I destroy something, there's going to be a purpose that comes out of it. Something good will happen, but not yet with that one. Not yet, but someday. And you can tell that I love to not just make art, but I make a lot of portraiture. I make a lot of pictures of people, and I occasionally will also draw pictures of myself, because I think it's a nice thing to think about who we are, where we are in the world today, where we're going tomorrow, and it's kind of a moment encapsulated in time. And so you might see where I'm going with this is I want you to, again, open up your phone, bring up the browser. And if you joined a little late, you missed the directions here, you want to, on your phone, open up this website. And that is going to give us the ability to draw pictures. And the fourth and final picture I want you to draw is, drumroll, I want you to draw yourself. So probably you need to switch back to the pencil tool and the little brush. And now you know all the tools down here. So go ahead, go wild, draw your picture of yourself however you see yourself. You can be super kind of wild with this. You can go more simplistic and like stick figure. You can go kind of any route. If you want to spend a few extra minutes, that is totally cool. If you need to use the eraser, my hand has, of course, a little bit of a tremor in it, which is why I end up getting a little more of these little spikes and spirals. But I kind of like it because it ends up looking more like an actual drawing versus something that was too computerized. So it has all these extra little bits on it, which is fun. So do your drawing. You could be, again, caricature or stick figure. You can just maybe a little more anime in a certain sense, however you want to go there. And then when you are done, hit submit on that. And as you're doing that, don't feel rushed. I want to share one more art project with you, and then I'll kind of wrap everything up. And if anybody has any questions, we can jump over to that. But what happened a number of years ago, and this idea of keeping myself open to possibilities, is one time I was driving around. I was running some errands. And as I was running errands, it was lunchtime. So I grabbed some hamburgers and some French fries. And I'm driving around, I'm eating the burgers. And then at one point, I reach into the bag to grab the last French fry, because you have to grab the last French fry. And as I'm doing that, I realized that I could actually see my skin tone through the white paper bag, because the grease from the hamburgers had actually made the bag a little bit transparent, as we've all seen, right? So you've seen that before, but all of a sudden, because I have this idea in art that if I can find two shades within a material, I can make a picture. And the burger grease on the paper, making it a little bit transparent, meant all of a sudden the paper could have two different shades. And I kid you not, this is painting with hamburgers. And we call that the Mona Grisa, by the way, which I love. I didn't come up with the name Mona Grisa. I wish I had, but unfortunately I did not. It was somebody else's idea, but it was an entertaining bit. So this idea, again, kind of to wrap up this whole idea for you, is our limitations that we face. They're usually really annoying, right? I think that's something we can all share, that the challenge that we're up against, they're a bummer. But when we can find a way to get systematically creative, when we can find a way to start to shift our beliefs, keep ourselves open to other people's perspectives, probably those around you who are you may be going through some similar things, when we start to do that, that's where we can start to take the categories in life and start to make them a little more malleable, move things around. That's where we can take the expectations that are thrust upon us and shift the results. And all of a sudden, all the possibilities really start to open up. It doesn't feel like a single path anymore. This is not, I realized this one day, and this is a little cheesy, but again, it's not one path, it is many paths when we open ourselves up to that creative potential. So instead of telling each other, as we so often do in this society, you know, to seize the day, carpe diem, what I try to remind myself as often as I can is that instead we need to seize the limitation, because that is where so many beautiful results are. So thank you so much for joining me here in the studio today. Super, super appreciate it. And I do want to kind of do a little transition over here to some of your drawings that have been coming in. So let's see, let me give a little refresh on it. And these are lovely. I am curious. Okay, we got somebody at the laptop, and we have a little thing going on here. I like the hair decorations down here. That is nice. And this one, I have a couple more questions on this one. I love that though. I love that. And Jenna, I would like to bring you in now and see if, of course, I need to make sure my earpiece is still working. So if I don't hear you in a moment, I may need to refresh my earpiece, because that happens occasionally.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, yes, perfect.
Yay, perfect.
Yay.
Oh, that was so good, Phil. You know, I've seen your presentation many times, so I feel like I always take something new from it. And you know, selfishly, I'm sure a lot of it is based on what I'm dealing with or where I'm at. So I loved when you started, you were talking about how some of your little projects are on the edge of starting. And I feel like that's such a good motto for right now. I'm like, 2021 is like on the edge of starting. Like we're like, we feel like we're right there.
Yes.
And obviously, you know, honestly, I felt like throughout all of 2020, having seen your presentation, this is one of the reasons why I love my job. I felt like all year I was telling myself to embrace the shake. Like, just
that's awesome.
2020, it was like, just embrace the shake. This is what it is. And so, you know,
and I could even say for me as well, you know, that just that simple idea, and that's what I love. It been in hindsight, like, wow, I'm really glad I had such a clear experience, because of course, you know, I'm sure all of us have had our own shakes that we've embraced, but for me, it was just so blindingly clear, because, you know, art in my life was gone and then it was back. And so to have kind of that moment, and then of course have the amazing opportunity to sit and think about how do you make that transition, has been so helpful during these times, you know, having to make all kinds of transitions and just constantly innovate and evolve, because, you know, what we do the first time may not be the answer for down the road, and just kind of keep moving on that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and you know, when you talked about how like the limitation can drive creativity, I mean, we saw that 2020 was like the year of bread, and people were just doing so much for like either side hustles or family projects, home renovations. It totally drove creativity. I mean, those are the silver linings of limitations for sure. So tell me a little bit more, and you guys feel free to throw questions into the chat, please. We'll make sure that those get answered. But tell me, obviously, you know, you've been speaking and you have still been doing a lot in this space. And I always think it's funny, you didn't mention it today, but I know that you used to despise public speaking, right?
It was such an uncomfortable thing for me for a long time. I mean, the first speech I ever gave was a TED Talk. Like, being on stage, like as an artist, that is not the place I ever wanted to be. Having people's eyeballs, you know, the whites of eyes staring at me was just like, made me recoil. But yeah, so TED, that was my first opportunity. I practiced like crazy for that thing, you know, because again, never been on stage. So I'm like, I've never used a clicker for a projector before. So I set up a projector, and I actually went extreme with it. I even emailed people at TED and I was like, tell me about the stage. What's the parameters? And so in my living room, I even taped off where everything was. And then I knew that I would be caught off guard, because of course at TED, there's all kinds of weirdly famous people there. Jim Carrey was in the audience. And so like all of a sudden I'm like, wait, if I looked over and saw Jim Carrey, that would freak me out. And so what I did is I went through and I just printed out all these pictures of famous people and I actually put them around the room. And so as I would give my presentation, I would intentionally look at, oh, there's so-and-so, and like bouncing around the room and making myself comfortable with that space. So yes, speaking is definitely not something that I was ever comfortable with, but I love storytelling and I love video. I love bringing those elements together. And so honestly, this virtual space has been kind of a sweet spot for me, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you would never know either on a stage or on camera, because camera's not easy either, but you would never know that you ever had a self-limiting belief about public speaking. Okay, so Michael just said that he agreed with me. He's used your lessons since seeing you at the Cliff House, which I was also there with you.
Awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful property and location. One of the
Yeah.
presentations that has had the greatest impact on me. And so thank you, Michael, for sharing that, because
Awesome.
I certainly
Michael.
agree. Anything else you're working on? You know, we talked about some of your projects that you're doing. Anything that
Yeah.
you've been doing during the pandemic, or anything that you've got like going on? I mean, are you still doing
Yeah.
like videos and sharing those? Because I think you were like way ahead of your time with doing these artistic videos, but are you still doing things like that? And what's going on new with you?
Yeah, for me on the art side, and I do want to say the one thing that, so tying back again to kind of with Ted, I got super lucky, but then if you tied Ted back even further, the early videos that I made, I was actually posting videos in 2006, which is when YouTube started. So I was like at the very edge of YouTube, which ended up being amazing because there were actually not very many people posting original content on YouTube. Of course, now original content is king, but back then it was just people were posting clips of shows and just little things here and there. And I got super lucky. And that was back when YouTube had one front page, and they actually featured, I think it was 4 or 5 of my videos in the first year of me posting. So it was kind of this incredible jumping off point. And then of course to take that to TED, to then share my own personal life. And then from there. And so now I'm kind of in this weird place actually. So the studio that I'm in right now is not where I was a year ago. So in the middle of I guess the kind of the lifting of some of the COVID lockdown. So back in last June, I was in the midst of huge text art projects. I was doing these huge projects. And actually, I think I can probably, as you're watching, and you saw that we have the ability to share the screen here.
Yep.
If we can just share the screen, what I'll do is I will play this video, because this one is something I just finished up in the last years, or this is back in June. So this is, again, one of these big handwritten text artworks that I love to do. And I spent, it was about maybe 2.5 weeks full time. And this is a woodcut. For some people, it's very clear. For others people, it's kind of like, wait, what's happening here? So this is a woodcut, so a slice of wood. And that's all of the grain that you have through there. And what I did is something that I actually started this project. It was another story project, so collecting stories. And what I did is I asked people, it was kind of a little bit dark, but ended up being really beautiful. So what I did is I asked people to share stories about a death that they remember, because of course we all have moments in our life where maybe even a pet dying, a person passing away are really kind of pivotal moments. And I was just thinking about things in life that I'm uncomfortable with, and death is one of those things I'm uncomfortable with. So I asked people to start sharing stories, and I had been collecting stories for the last year and a half before COVID even started, but then I was doing this in the midst, and this has actually turned into now a series. So I'm doing a number of these. I'm on my 3rd one right now, and it is just wildly time consuming. And so I've been trying to give myself a break with the little people and the sawdust. And then another one is I actually bought a movie, an actual 35 millimeter projected movie. And it ends up, I don't know if I had never seen an actual movie before, but in terms of the movie reel, but it's like 6 reels of film. So it's like a stack of film like this big. It's absolutely massive. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the strip of the film to actually make a big picture, kind of, again, a little bit of a mosaic.
Oh,
so
cool.
That's another one that's on the high.
I can't wait to see it. Okay, we've got a good question coming in. It looks like you create freehand. What happens when you make a mistake?
So one of the beautiful parts of video is I do get to share everything, right? I get to share the process of creating, but then what happens is a lot actually gets lost in video because I do have to work so big. And I say that to say that when you get close to the canvas, you'll actually see then there's variation here. So in terms of the amount of planning that I do, I'm not a savant. I am a very, very hard worker. So forgive me in terms of the video and that, because what you can see, like with the big handwriting projects, when you actually get close to it, and I don't think I can back this one up and see that example. No, you can see the lines, but you can't see the other lines. But in these horizontal lines that you see, but then also there's actually other sketch lines that help me create these shapes. And so, but they kind of disappear in the video. You can see a little bit up in here. But so I do a bit of sketching, but it really depends on what I'm working on. So for example, like the Bruce Lee piece, that one I had absolutely no sketching, but I had a picture that I was working from. And so but then time also is one of the things that gets lost in video. And so I'll look at the picture and I'll be like, okay, this needs to go over here, and I'll put a few hits, and I'll go back and look at the picture where I need to go next. I'm moving the camera. And so what happens in a 30-second video is actually hours of work. So a lot of stuff gets lost in that process. So maybe
So
a
for
little
people
longer
who have
than my
not seen you before or are not familiar with you, you do this interactive piece like you did with us today, live in person, and it
Yep.
usually takes you a few hours to create something if you're live, at an event. For this,
Well,
we're going to be sending out a follow-up, correct?
Yeah, and actually, so I've even made an extra transition because I talked about the tremor in my hand. Well, the other thing that's begun to happen is I've begun to have joint issues in my thumb,
Right.
literally just assembling these mosaic artworks. And so now the process that I'm going to be doing is in a live event, everybody in the audience will actually be drawing on their phones. And then as you did today, you'll be submitting the drawings, and then I'll come back to the studio and I'll actually assemble the mosaic artwork, which ends up having really kind of beautiful metaphors for our piece in the bigger picture. You can almost instantly see it, how if you have a room of 500 people and they're all contributing drawings, well, everybody's drawing is going to be like this big in the final picture, but then it's still there, it still exists, it's still important. And as you back away from the picture, you see the larger whole. And so, yes, over the course of the next week and a half here, I'll actually be taking all the drawings that were submitted and I'll be making one big artwork, and I will make a video showing some of that behind the scenes, kind of walking you through the whole process of creating the piece and then revealing the artwork at the end. And I'll share that video in a bit. So.
Well, I can't wait to see it. Thank you for doing this with us today.
Cool.
I think
Yeah.
you're so great to work with. I think your art is mind blowing. You're genius. I just can't say enough about you. And I think your work and your message is super relevant right now to everybody. So thanks for being here with us.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone
Yeah.
for spending the hour with us, and we'll send out the recording maybe tomorrow, and then that follow-up artwork piece, which I can't wait to see in about a week and a half to 2 weeks. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks so
Great.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.